and welcome back to Have You Seen My Film, a Kinema podcast. I'm Christy Marchese, founder and CEO of Kinema, and today we are talking with Fassa Sar, the founder and CEO of Callo. Callo enables any creator to have a studio. It's a platform that helps you find collaborators, manage your creative slate, and take your projects to market all in one platform. I was kind of describing it as it's like LinkedIn for the entertainment industry meets Asana meets like an online film marketplace. We dig into what the platform does, how she founded it, how it's based on her time as an acquisitions executive at Sony's, and what's some of the macro trends she's seeing from all the projects across the platform. All right, we are here with Fassa Sar, the founder and CEO of Callo. Hi, Fassa. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Christy.
All right, you have a super interesting background. So you were on the executive side, you were a little bit on the creative side. Tell me more about yourself. Like, what were you doing before Callo? And then we want to get into why did you start Callo?
Yeah, definitely. So I actually started off my career at Variety Magazine as well as United Talent Agency before I landed at Sony Pictures. I started, funny enough, on the TV sales side of Sony Pictures. So I was very, very, very in like the numbers, distribution, how do we make money? And I slowly started to veer into the creative side, so the acquisition side. The acquisitions team at Sony Pictures is run by Joe Matukowicz, and he really kind of set up the whole entire division to be focused on finding great projects across 7 different labels. And my job was to go and find incredible projects around the world and then bring them under the Sony banner. So it was really, really a fun thing. I got to go basically shopping. We had shopping lists at different film festivals like Cannes and Sundance and Tribeca and so forth. And my job was essentially bringing great filmmakers, first-time, second-time filmmakers, and then bringing them under the Sony banner.
I mean, acquisitions is like a dream job. Every time I'm like, you get to go to festivals, you get to watch a bunch of movies. And yes, there's a mandate. And it's always, of course, hard to like say no or not pick certain projects, but like, what a dream job.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I didn't know, because I was totally new to acquisitions. Again, I came from TV sales side. Before that, I was at UTA. I thought I wanted to be an agent. So for me coming on to the acquisition side, I think I was very, very new to how it worked. You know, you have development, which is typically like you work with a filmmaker and you help develop that project out. With acquisitions, you don't really have that kind of early days of a project. You kind of see it when it's already packaged, so when it already has its team together or when a script is already done, or you see it at the end where it's actually premiering at a festival. So for me, it was like, oh, wow, I could actually come in when it's a little bit more baked and I could really be able to see that vision and then bring it to TriStar, Columbia, Classics, whatever that label was. And so it was a really, really amazing experience. I spent 5 years there. So I started off as a baby assistant and then grew up to be an executive. And yeah, I had a lot of fun.
Oh, wow. And then, so like, tell me a little bit about where the world was at when you started Callo. So like we met through one of our previous guests on this podcast. She was raving about your company. I was like, okay, like I'll take a look at it. And I took a look at the deck. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Now, I obviously don't know much about that. I've never been an executive at Sony. I've actually never been on the development side. I kind of similar to you in acquisitions, see films once they're fully baked, once they're coming off a festival, once they're leaning into distribution. But what the platform does is connect with filmmakers and all types of creatives much, much earlier. So tell me a little bit, where were you? What company were you at? Or where was your mindset? And where was the industry at when you started to develop the concept for Callo?
Yeah, definitely. So it was around actually 2020 where I started to have this kind of experience around what the future was going to be in the next 5-10 years and how creatives would essentially be their own studios. And I started to have this feeling that I was at a studio, Sony Pictures, one of the legacy studios, and I started to realize actually there are a lot of creatives out there that have their own audience, their own IP, and all they really need is capital, or maybe they're getting capital directly from their audience. And so how are they able to actually develop projects so that they can build their slate? And if they can build their slate, then ultimately they can run their own studios. And so for me, I started to really kind of understand that with the Alex Coopers and the Jay Shettys and kind of these big time creators at that time. But then I was like, okay, those are, you know, some of the top creators, but you also see that with creators. And I think filmmakers, these are directors, obviously these are writers. They all have, and they can have their own audiences. And so how do you empower them to do that? Well, you give them the tools so that they can do it much more easily, right? And so my moment in time was in 2020 when I started to realize, actually, I want to explore this further. So I actually applied for a Fulbright, which for many of those who are not familiar with a Fulbright. It's basically this crazy award that you receive to go to a university anywhere in the world, or you get kind of money to be able to work on your PhD, your master's, and your thesis. And so I actually brought Callo as a thesis for a Fulbright, and I basically pitched them this idea that creators should be studios. And so like, how can we do that? And I moved to London to be able to explore that further. And really, Callo was born out of that. I was able to research, talk to directors, not just in LA, where I was, historically from, but also I was able to talk to directors and writers and producers in different parts of the world, like in the UK, in London, in Paris, in Spain, all these different places. And I was just like, wow, if you move out of the 13-mile radius of LA or New York, access is just so different. And so what if we could be able to actually build a scalable platform that really focuses on that?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think you described it to me in like one sentence where it was like giving studio tools to everybody. Like what you get when you're at a big studio or even a mid-sized studio, what you get in terms of development, support, tools, connections. How could you scale that so that any creator or any creative person could have access to it?
That's exactly right. And I think when we think about development sometimes sounds like a scary word. You're developing a slate or you're developing a studio. It sounds like really heavy lifting, and you think, oh, I can't do that, but someone else should do that. And you typically just think about the old legacy studios like a Disney or like a Sony, but also you think about the A24s and you think, oh, I'm so far from that. But actually, creators right now, they're the closest that they've ever been to basically being small, medium enterprises. And really, they just need the tools and the operating system to run much faster at the earliest stages of their ideas. And if we could provide that, where they feel like they actually have the rails, then they can do anything. And so that's really what we believe.
I feel like I've seen like a fair amount of different tools, like how do project management to job finding sites that are like, oh, it's like LinkedIn, but for the entertainment industry. What you showed me was fascinating. It did seem like it's a combination of these things without trying to, I guess, over verticalize, if that's a phrase, like without trying to pack in too much. But it seems like there's discovery. And so if I'm looking for a project or I'm looking to hire people on my project, that exists. There's like a place to store, almost like a, I don't know, like a browsing catalog, a market, thank you, as I was looking for, of projects that are available. And then there are also project management tools. It felt like an Asana for like taking the project across the finish line. So can you walk me through what is the actual Callo product? How do you describe it? And then when should someone think about coming on to Callo?
Yeah, definitely. So how we describe it is Callo is an operating system for project building. We focus on three main features across our platform, which is discover. So find collaborators for your projects. Market, which is take your projects out to market and using the tools to do so. And then of course, studio, which is really the core central part of our platform, which is like, hey, I have 5 projects that I'm building all at once. How do I build this with my team and collaborate with my team across tasks and notes and agreements, as well as really being able to build a space to actually showcase with a financier or showcase with other collaborators or showcase directly with distributors. So all of these 3 features, our flagship features, all tie into each other because we really just focus on idea to market.
So if I'm a filmmaker, I've got 5 projects in the works. One is just a concept. Like I just have an idea. I'm just at script stage or something. I can have that in there. Or let's say I have another one that's coming off the festival market. Is it too late for me to come on to Callo, or how is Callo helpful for me if my film is fully baked and fully done? Or is it like, no, it's really meant for development in earlier stages?
Yeah, so Callo starts as early as you'd like. So again, idea to market. So what does that look like? So I have a concept and I have just an idea. I need to find a writer. I need to find a director. I need to find a producer. So you can start as early as that. Then you have market, which is really focused on projects that are packaged maybe already, projects that are, already half financed or they're ready to be sold. We focus much more, I would say, on sales and financing. I think when we look at sales, that's really where I think the cliff goes off the rails of like, hey, I've been able to find financing, but then I can't actually sell this movie to be able to pay back my financier. We really focus on the sales portion. And really when that happens across the platform, it's really where market is like a core central feature for them.
And so from my understanding too, so it's not also just for creative. So you might have studio partners or agency partners that are looking for projects to fund. Is that correct?
That's correct. Exactly. So of course, our ICP or our persona that we like to say is, of course, creatives, right? Creatives are the core part of our platform, but that's only half. The other half is actually the producers, it's the executives, it's the brands, it's the financiers, and of course, it's the distributors, right? So we really look at how do we have the supply side of the platform, and then how do we have really the demand side of the platform. And so that's what we cater to on each side.
This is a lot of technology. So how did you feel somewhat familiar with being in the startup space? The idea you start with isn't always the idea you go to market with. And even when you do, once it's in the market, it's going to change. And we got to find that classic product market fit. So how did you go from the idea that you had at the Fulbright, under Fulbright, to what it is now? How did you start and how did it change?
I feel like that is something that I definitely didn't realize when I first started Callo. Again, I did my master's specifically in entrepreneurship at the School of Management. So the thing that they teach you, they're like, only focus on one thing, only focus on one thing. Don't do anything else. Just focus on one thing and let that be amazing. And so that's what we did. We really focus on only the discover part of our platform, which is like, hey, I need to find a producer, or I need to find a director. I need to complete my team. I need to assemble my development team. How do I do that? Where do I go? And that ended up being a lot of what people needed. But what we realized is that actually, once you find your team, and we saw that with number of case studies on the platform, then they needed something else. They needed a place to develop together, right? And then they needed, after the place that they developed together, now they need financing, or now they need sales help. And so it was this level of, okay, how do we consolidate this? And let's look at the whole entire umbrella. The whole entire umbrella is essentially development. And really, to get to the next stage, right, which is production, is the marketplace, right? So idea to market is really where we focus on. And I think when we first started, of course, like every company, they start off with something where maybe they got a little bit of steam around it, a little bit of like, hey, like this is it. But then after they started to build further, they really started to see the stickiness. They really started to see the retention. And that's exactly what at Callo that's happening right now.
It's we were similar. We got that advice too. Just do one thing really, really well. And then we were told in the early days, like, we have amazing investors and partners, but some were like, you're doing too much. You can't do in-person events and virtual events and direct to audience streaming. And we had to kind of make a decision. Do we listen? And do we only do one thing? And we cut the part of the business that they think is not exciting or like sexy or cool, which we thought it was, which was in person. And then we're really glad we didn't get rid of that, because to us at this point, that's like more than like half the business are people coming to book in-person screenings. But it's tough. And so you have to listen to like yourself. You of course got to listen to the investors. They have experience and partners, but mostly you got to listen to your customer.
I was just going to say, it's your customer at the end of the day that's telling you what they need and what could be better. And every single quarter, we had what we call a postmortem on how we operated the previous quarter. And it's always around the customer. It's like the customer thought this, the customer thought that. What are the patterns, right? And then how do we make sure that we don't do it again the next quarter? That's the same thing with features. It's not always just about what we shouldn't do, but it's also like what we should keep doing. And I think that's really why we are a lean team, but we've been successful.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Well, speaking of successful, can you give me any sort of case studies? Are there any examples of someone that was early days on the platform and took their project from discover to sale?
So I'll give you an example of Julie Goldstone. She's this incredible creative. And one thing about Callo is that we really, really focus on, helping those who are first time, second time filmmakers and creators and producers overall. When I started Callo and when I was at Sony, that was also something I was really, really excited about. So Julie Goldstone is an example of that. Julie had been a Vogue photographer, a New York Times photographer, and she was like, I really, really, really want to create a film, but I don't know how. I know that I'm, a boss in all these other spaces, but I just literally feel like I don't know how to build in the film and television medium. She came to Callo and she really was able to find not only just her producer, her writer, but also really her financier all on the Callo platform. And I thought that was really incredible because, again, she didn't know anyone before she started at Callo and before she became a member and before she started building her 3 projects that she now has with us. But really, she was coming at it from the perspective of, I have a knowledge gap. And I think at Callo, what we do really well is that we give our users the confidence who needed to be able to actually build within this space. And so, of course, we don't just focus on film and television. We focus on books, we focus on games, we focus on a varied number of mediums in the entertainment sphere. But with Julie, she was very much like, I want to do something. I have the courage to do something, but I just don't have the operating system to be able to execute at the earliest stages. And so Callo really helped and slid right into what she needed across the board. And now she's building all of these projects. And so she just was able to complete her independent television show. And so that's going to be coming out really soon. And now all of the folks that are now on that team who maybe weren't members of Callo before are also now members of Callo. So it really helps to accelerate, how we're growing as a network.
No, that makes sense. It's a network effect. I think like most platforms, I put ourselves in the platform space because like it's marketplace, it's discovery. There's similar parallels, even though we do completely different things. But it is also, you get what you put into it. And I guess that's like most platforms. You can't just show up on Instagram and expect people to follow. You have to give great content. So for us, it's the same thing. We're going to give a great tool set, but also you have to put some time into thinking about your distribution and having a strategy. So in the case of Julie or other creatives, is it similar? Is it like, okay, you also have to like use it like a social network. You need to be finding people or talking to people. How do you recommend, or what are the best ways for someone like a Julie to engage and build that team? How does that work?
Yeah, definitely. And like the previous question, individuals come into Callo at different stages of where they're at. Like some folks, I say folks, members, of course, some members actually just decide to come in when they just need an operating system and they just need one part of the operating system, which is I need to organize the work that we love, right? Like I just need to organize that because if we don't, we're going to get swallowed by how hectic everything is. And so sometimes individuals just come in for a studio only. Then there are individuals who are like, I'm solo and I'm starting solo and I really, really love this idea that I'm working on. And I need a director or I need a showrunner or I need a producer to help build this out. And so they are using Discover. Discover works in a very interesting way that's not actually as a directory like many other platforms that are out there. Actually, Callo is a person essentially that you can talk to. And when you are talking to Callo, you can describe exactly who you are looking for. So I'm looking for a director that focuses on gritty crime thrillers in the $5 million space. Can you help me and point me into the right direction? So really like a partner more than anything, right? But it's almost like you're talking to a human, like you're talking to me and you're describing. And that's really actually how that feature came to life. I was like, wow, so many people come to me saying exactly who they need. They're so detailed. And I'm like, oh, and do you need this? And do you need that? And that level of massaging of really getting to the bottom of what that person might need is exactly how we built Callo Discover. So really, it's like a partner that you're sitting with across, again, idea to market so that you don't feel alone in the earliest stages.
Ah, that's cool. It's also, I think you're responding to the shift in how we communicate with technology. We used to, punch things into Google by asking. Now we have conversations with AI. So there's a shift. As a platform, you can see some trends. We know what, on average, people are willing to pay for a ticket to something, or what the average rental price is, or where people are located. And we share that anonymized data. Are there any sort of macro trends you're seeing in terms of all the projects across Callo?
Yeah. So I would say that when we look at who's actually building within the Callo platform, I would say, creatives who tend to be solo creators are oftentimes looking at how they can actually find the right producers, even though that's a narrative that you don't hear very often in the creator economy. They're like, oh, I just want to, create and I just want to put it out there. But actually, no, like producers are the most needed essential part of the team. And I would say, and this is probably a larger macro trend of like, producers are oftentimes the ones that are least thought about. They're the least, supported. And I think at Callo, they're the most necessary. We need more producers. There are many creatives out there that are building and creating, but actually at the end of the day, producers are the ones that help to bring projects alive. And so really when I think about what we're doing at Callo, we often talk about creators, but really the heart of our platform, they're the producers as well. And so I think that's one of the things that I would just believe everyone who's listening right now. Yes, go out and be a creator, but also think about how you can produce or find others that would like to produce so that they can really help a whole new cohort of creatives. So that's one thing that I would just leave with. I think in terms of other macro trends that are just happening in the industry that I think is just so important to recognize as well is that we have a really, really, really big issue with, compensating our teammates. We just have a really big issue with that. And so one of the things that we do at Callo, and we want to make sure, is that every single individual has access to agreements that talk about equity, that really talk about how points can be shared, that talk about how individuals can come together, work together. But ultimately, it's about equity in the project and its upside. And so I think that's another thing that I would say, especially when you think about the conversation around obsession.
I was just thinking that, right? $750,000 film on track to make $250 million. And a lot of the crew was volunteering or working for a low day rate, and there was no equity compensation.
There's no equity compensation. And really, when we talk about just the upside, what happens when a project does really, really well? Is it because projects don't do typically well and so we don't think about it? It shouldn't be the case, right? Now, like the conversation is turning, and actually there's so much money in media. There's so much money in content. There's so much money in what we create, and especially how projects are being built today. So what we really want to make sure at Callo and our members is that they have the opportunity to talk about that at the earliest stages. And so that's one of the things that I think on a macro, scale, the conversation around equity, participation, and then what does that actually look like in features, right? That we can actually offer to our membership.
No, that makes sense. It's interesting. I'm not sure. Hopefully by the time this episode comes out, there'll be some sort of response of what's changed. Maybe there was equity compensation for the obsession filmmakers, like even just 1%. And what that does also is it rallies the team behind it, where everyone feels like they have a bit more skin in the game. And it's true. Like historically, it's hard for films to break through like that. So we unfortunately accept those day rates because they're like, well, it might not pop anyway. You never know though. But I think that's one of my favorite things about being in this industry is nobody seems to ever know what's going to work. Just when we think we got it, it changes again. It should be encouraging for everybody who's building projects on Callo.
I'll just say too, I think one thing that I see right now that I think is really exciting is that there's a whole new crop of creatives and producers alike, and also executives too, who are all like, you know what? We have to do something better than what our predecessors have done for us, right? And I think what's really, really cool is when you do think about some of what's happening right now, all of these case studies, you really do have teams that are kind of figuring out, all right, well, how could I do this differently? There used to be something at studios where they were like, hey, we're not going to do this because the deals that came before just didn't allow for that, right? There's not much room to be creative. But I think now, with the new crop of creatives and also producers, I think we have an ability to actually ask for different types of deals. And because we're doing everything differently, why don't our deals, have a difference, right, as well? So I think that's something too that I've been thinking a lot about.
I think it makes sense. All contracts are made up. We all just decide these rules. These are agreements between two parties. You can change those agreements. We feel that way about windowing. Just because a film has gone through a certain cycle of festival theatrical doesn't mean that's the only way you can do it, and you can negotiate anything. So where do you see Callo going? What's in its most realized form? What does Callo look like? Is it every creative runs their project on there? Is it like the Asana of development? What's the big hopes and dreams for Callo moving forward?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for us, our goal is essentially to be able to not only just have creators run their own studios, but have creators run their own studios and meet audiences where they are, again, at the earliest stages. So how do we do this completely through technology? How do we do this where, again, we're like this invisible infrastructure that runs across every single studio? I think that's ultimately our end game is how do we make sure that as more projects are created and they're put on YouTube or Instagram, which 100% they are and they will be, how do we make sure at the earliest stages that idea is happening first on Callo? And I think that's where we get in this really exciting space of okay, we know exactly what are the first ideas that are coming. What are the ideas that are going to be the next obsession, going to be the next Backrooms, but also books as well, right? Books and games and a whole plethora of different mediums that can all happen and run through Callo. I believe also too that every brand, every team, every tech company in itself essentially is a content company. And so they essentially are also going to be running their projects and their creative vehicles also through Callo. And so I really believe that this whole economy of story is something that really runs through health and finance and tech, not just entertainment, like the traditional way of seeing it, but really through different mediums and also different markets. And so how can Callo be that for them? That's very easy, very intuitive, and anyone can do it, So that's really the goal.
It is a very beautiful platform. Thank you for giving me a preview of it. What they always forget to ask, but I do want to talk about cost. Filmmakers are constantly trying to manage their budgets, and you guys seem to have a few very cost-effective options. How does someone sign up for Callo, and then what should they be expecting to anticipate in terms of costs?
Yeah, so they can sign up for Callo going to our website, www.wearecallo.com, or going to our Instagram, wearecallo, and then going to the links in our bio. So that's the first thing. They are able to slowly go on and onboard onto the platform. And once they're approved onto the platform, then they're able to easily get on and set up their first project, whether they're a solo creator or producer and they're just starting off with an idea, or they already have a team. They can easily just start off by inviting the collaborators that are on their team that they even found off of Callo, just so that they can set up their studio and start building out those projects. And when it comes to cost, so your first project is free on Callo. We want you to try it, test it, see if it works for you. And then when you're wanting to publish into the marketplace, then that's when it's $55 per month. That's the starting cost. So it really is super easy and super seamless. And we try to make it so that it is cost effective because, those dollars, they add up.
They do, yes. Especially if when you become your own studio and you're running your own production and your development and then marketing and distribution, those costs do add up. Okay, great. Fassa, thank you so much for this. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you want to let filmmakers and industry members know?
No, I think first and foremost, I feel like there's just so much opportunity in this next era of entertainment. And I think we're at such a turning point, not only just in the box office, but what is happening in digital spaces. And I think also physical, right? Like how people can come together. You're just talking about how, so focused on in-person events. That is really the future. And really our hope and our goal is that these studios not only are just in the digital realm, but they're also in the physical realm and people are coming together and collaborating and building big. So I'm really excited for this next era.
Well, I'm excited. Thank you for building this. It takes a lot to start a company and run it. So thank you for doing this and thank you for doing this podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And that's our episode.
Thank you to our special guest, our producer and editor, Ron Pissarro, and you, the filmmakers, creators, marketers, and distributors that are dedicated to connecting audiences with great films.